the local municipality who had opted in, but they had not applied properly. Is that what we're finding?
Yes.
Okay. And what do I think about that? Well, first, I think it's better that it would have been a inspection that resulted in a notice to shut down instead of what could be described as a, battle, like a war field, like a war. What am I trying to say? A war zone.
A war zone.
When a place gets raided by a drug task force and doors are kicked in and assault rifles are used. So if we're asking about what I think, I mean, obviously the more civilized approach is better. I can say that without making it appear as if my guard has gone down or that I have been convinced that there will be no criminal, sanctions, which I have not for any of this behavior. I could comment on a couple of interactions we've had with the officials, the marijuana enforcement persons and whatnot. And I say that as opposed to like drug task forces, but marijuana enforcement from the medical marijuana program, where we've been able to actually have more civilized dialogue. And I say civilized dialogue as opposed to no dialogue and just raids and defending people where you search your Fifth Amendment right until it's time for you to search your medical defense. So it could be a new direction that's going. I think last week we talked a little bit when Jamie Lowell was here. Was he here last week or did he call in? He called in. Nevertheless, we were discussing how it seemed as if this new department is acting in a way that is a little bit more user-friendly. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I would say it's in their best interest that the program succeed, because if it doesn't, they lose their jobs.
And let's go back to the other thing. The question was, what do we think about them doing these spot checks, number one, and what, if anything, an impact does it have, or should we be concerned about it? Well, let's talk about this. Does anyone think it's significant that they're not raiding, right? I mean, couldn't they? I mean, what's the distinction of any of the other cases where we've had where they've raided?
I think that's a step forward.
Right.
Okay. What took them so long? Yeah. So in other words, whatever behavior, like the difference of illegality is less, that entitles one to a civil type of sanction, right? Mm-hmm. Like a right to have a shutdown notice. That's what the state's doing right now. Do you know how many clients would have benefited from this?
They would have loved that.
Probably love that, right? Or at least, not being misled by the local authorities that they would be, have no issues.
Right.
So the first thing is the notice, the way they're handling it. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts about after that? Because there's a lot of other things that still go along with that. I mean,
it's reminiscent of State versus McQueen. They did it that way. Then they did it with a civil case as opposed to, like you say, kicking in doors and starting a criminal case.
What Alan is referring to, I think, is that the action that brought about the Supreme Court decision in State versus McQueen was a action for an injunction. The county prosecutor at the circuit court had brought it for the Judge Chamberlain in a action to enjoin or stop from operating the apothecary, right? And they took testimony over, and the judge gave a ruling, and then it went. But yes, that was a civilized case, and there was a civil case, and the end result of that was not a conviction, but instead a order mandating that they close their business.
Yes, it was a loss for the cannabis community, but at least no one went to jail.
Right. And here we are now, and the talk and discussion is there some kind of reality here that we should expect going forward? Do you think the same civility should be offered, or we should expect to be offered to those operating within the running parallel system, the MMMA? What do you think, Chad?
Yes, I mean, if there's some type of a problem, I mean, I don't think that they should go and serve cease and desist letters to everybody that's got a card. No.
Well, I'm saying, should we expect that from the for those people participating in the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act as opposed to the MMFLA?
Isn't that what we've kind of got essentially is the people that did not apply for MMFLA and whose only protections are under the MMMA are being served with cease and desist letters.
So it goes back to what Alan said, like people being
all the
McQueen.
current dispensaries rely on the MMMA still.
You know, they should have shut them down with nuisance letters, not raids.
This is all temporary because once the system is enacted and once they stabilize it by shutting down all these facilities, anyone that pops up is going to be charged with manufacturer delivery. That's what's going to happen. So this is all very temporary.
The MMA and the emergency rules are the only authority that applies here.
When did the emergency rules end? April? No. Soon.
I believe.
Very soon.
I believe
Until
it's
the permanent
July.
rules are. Right? Yeah. There's no deadline on them. It's until otherwise, and the uncertainties of it will exist only until. Oh, you gotta get on. Here he comes. He's making an appearance. Did you file an appearance in this case?
Schuyler.
No.
He's on the record
Tell me.
now.
Just realize that it's emergency rules by a state agency. Like, that's not a whole
Law.
lot of authority. And it's just that the Michigan State Police are now writing these cease and desists, which is just,
Insane. Right.
yeah. But the thing is, it didn't come out of, any licensing
Law?
authority. All they do is
Oh no,
license.
the emergency rules are authorized by Lara, and are a representation of conduct that is, I would argue, would
But
be
they're
the equivalent
emergency.
of. I understand.
Like, there was no due process. Like, these are emergency rules by an administrative agency that affect the, perhaps, rights under McQueen of people who have patients. And most of these are allowed under local rule, and they grant more than just simply what the MMA allows. They could caregiver transfer centers.
Okay, what about it?
This is the
That's-
harmonization point.
That's, yeah, I mean, it's just whatever they want to do now. And I think that this white glove treatment is better than just raids.
Yeah, of course
But
it
these
is.
people will be rated eventually.
What do we? Okay, we all assume that.
They're coming
100%.
They are.
Why would a licensing scheme has to exist? We we go after criminally, dentists who practice without licenses. Do you think we're not going to go after marijuana growers who grow without licenses? Michigan loves its licensing schemes. We have more licenses for like hair cutters than
I know.
other states. It's bizarre.
It's like a million licenses.
The only
they go.
thing that's kept them away from patients and caregivers is the confidentiality. That's the only thing that's kept them away from patients and caregivers.
Is anyone going to actually not comply with the cease and desist, though? That's an interesting question.
If they don't
Yes.
comply, they'll go to jail.
Yeah, then they will be
Right.
rated for real.
Then there's a legal issue.
Well, I guess we'll see how it
That's
works
the
out.
harmonization point that I was talking about.
You know what's kind of
where
interesting
They're
that-
going to harmonize between the two acts.
I'll tell you what's interesting to me. is
Poorly.
The Chad mentioned the confidentiality factor, and most people may or may not realize that entering into a state licensed facility does not protect the patient identity, and there's been no steps taken, as far as I know right now, to secure the privacy of the patient. I know other states have taken some steps to have a 24-hour, 48-hour period where the records from those days of sales to patients would be destroyed. Michigan is yet to do that. Also, because of the unfettered and no barrier administrative authority that the state police has to inspect, spot check these locations, and gather information of who the customers are, quote unquote patients, may bother some people, it may not. Who would be bothered by that? Jamie? Okay. Assuming someone is a patient and you go and you purchase some cannabis at a dispensary, you walk out, you get in your car, and you see the police go in, and no one else is there. They just go in, they get information. You see them pointing. As you're sitting in your car, point at that guy right there who just came in, and they're pointing at you. They get the information. They walk out, and now what?
It's all tracked by the whole system anyway, so they can do that right at headquarters. I don't even think they have to go into the building.
No,
But they may want to see
they
who's
don't have
going
to
in
go
and
to the
going out.
building.
They can access.
They get a
it from
driver's
their
license. I
car.
mean, listen, I'm gonna, act, like talk worst case scenario. They get a driver's license, license plate. They know the vehicle. They see it later on. They got a name of someone. They got a list of all the patients in town. I mean, who knows?
Yep.
Is that weird? I mean, it's easier to obtain that information without Fourth Amendment objections than it is. I mean, whether it's happening or the NSA
They don't-
information that they're
they-
gathering.
they-
It's a smaller group of people. It's
They
easier.
don't have to ask for permission to get it. It's freely available to them.
But this is contrasted with the current framework under the Medical Marijuana Act, where that information is confidential.
And criminalized if one violated the confidentiality.
So I guess the next question is, are they going to impose this tracking on caregivers to patients? Are they going to put that as an amendment to the Medical Marijuana Act?
No, never.
Is the tracking part of the MMMA? Did they modify the act? So how does the confidentiality
You freely
combine
give up
with
your
the MMFLA bullshit
you freely give up
in
your
a record? Is that
you freely give up your right to confidentiality when you participate in that scheme.
Does it say that?
They did poke a hole in Section
they?
6
Okay.
for the dispensaries to be able to get and just enough information to confirm the registry card. So there is a modification to the MMA to allow for that now.
But it's still confidential. All that data is still
All the rest of it is
confidential.
still confidential. There's just another, very similar to how law enforcement can get just enough
lean, yeah.
information.
But that's only the-
it's phrased similarly.
That's only the LoRa information, though. That's the point. Like, when they go and they enter a facility and they want to inspect the records, they have your name. They have it. They have all your information.
Yes.
And they're going to be tracking your daily limit,
Yes.
Jim.
And
Because-
what if you go over? The machine's not supposed to let you go over. But how about this? How about this, fellas? The state will have a list of known marijuana users that they can cross-reference against the driver's license database.
They can't do that according to the Act the way that it's written currently.
They can take the data they glean from their inspections at these facilities and absolutely do that. They will know everybody who's purchasing marijuana because it's not through the LoRa. They're not accessing anything to do with LoRa. They're accessing the dispensary records, which they are entitled to do.
The seed to sale tracking system is immune from FOIA, but I'll have to. I would assume that loophole would not be allowed. There's an intent to keep the actual transaction secret from the public. But I'm not saying that it's great. I mean, law enforcement has it. You're right. They have it from the central office, so to speak. So they'll be looking for the patterns through it. That's what it's there for. It's meant to be a law enforcement tool.
So who gets to decide what your daily and monthly and weekly limit is? What kind of doctor's deciding that one?
I would say probably Dr. Eden Wells. What do you
Dr.
think?
Eden Wells.
Oh,
That's who
jeez.
I'd suggest.
It's a terrible
Does
situation.
she even think marijuana is medicine?
Certainly not for autistic children.
Yeah.
No, but
It's every regulatory handle that they have is really a tool for law enforcement. If if a facility is broken into, if there's an employee, a new employee, or somebody that has to be fired, all of these things have to be reported to law enforcement because they come and investigate. That's how it's going to go down. They're
But
going to
what's-
come and investigate,
Our
and they're going to
worst-
try to unwind whatever it is that's happening.
Our worst nightmare on this thing is the fact that the police already have an automated license plate reader in their vehicles, so that when you're driving along, if your license plate is expired, or your registration's expired, and you say you were supposed to renew it on your birthday, which was, say, March 9th, well, your sticker on your license plate says March. But when you drive by a police car, if his scanner gets a hold of that license plate, he's going to get a notification that that car's got expired plates, and he's going to pull you over. Anyway, using that plate analogy, my biggest fear is that they're going to do that with the seed-to-sale tracking system. You're going to drive by a cop, and he'll get a thing popping up on a screen saying this person just purchased 2.5 ounces at this dispensary.
So you're saying there might be targeting of patients, Alan?
Like there isn't already. In Detroit, Grosse Pointe border, it was observed that police were sitting right at the border of Grosse Pointe, and anybody who's going into a dispensary in Detroit that was within eye shot, once they drove their car into Grosse Pointe, they were getting pulled over by the police.
Isn't it true that there are certain protected classes that can't be targeted under our constitutional law?
In theory, yes. In reality, Hell no.
Yeah, it's an
But we can
old
make some
cop
law.
trick. They've been doing that for years.